Welcome everybody to our Impact IRL, Affecting Change and Empowering People. Thank you everyone who is here and not in the other, at the other stage. We love you all. And we have an amazing lineup today, and I'm gonna ask the wonderful women sat to my right to introduce themselves, what they're working on, what the projects are, and then we're gonna tackle a couple of questions, and what I'd love to do is to get some questions from the audience. So Christina, we'll start with you. Let's pass it around.
Awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Christina Lamazzo. I lead the blockchain team at UNICEF Innovation. We have a venture arm that invests in early stage startups in emerging or developing economies, and also have an internal team who builds in-house products. One of those, which is the Boost token, which we announced yesterday during Chris Fabian's Impact speech.
Hi, my name is Gloria Cambrala. I'm formerly with Square. I lead initiatives that deal with diversity into tech and inclusion into the tech space, now transferring into the blockchain space. I've worked with kids from 2 all the way up to college, teaching them how to code and getting them into tech and leading different types of camps. And there's also like diversifying companies from C orgs all the way down. So inclusion is definitely one of my passions. My initiative for 2019 is to have inclusion in the Ethereum space, both in emerging markets, within minorities, and also with women.
Hi there, I'm Grace Torres. I am a founder of Blockchain for Humanity and Giveth. And I am actually representing Blockchain for Humanity in this particular panel. It's a not-for-profit foundation that actually supports projects using blockchain technology for social good. And we do this in a number of ways, and I hope I can explain to you a little bit later exactly how we do this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tove Andersson, and I run a network called Cryptogaris, which is network in Sweden for women and non-binary to kind of get into crypto and blockchain. We're about 2,000 members today, so it's growing steadily, and there is a lot of curiosity, which is nice. I'm also CMO of Superblocks. We build developer tools, for Solidity.
Awesome. And I'm Simona. I'm a co-founder of the Bounties Network. We've been doing a lot of work in terms of diversifying the application of bounties into environmental and social impact. And speaking of impact, how would you define it? Because there's a lot of talk around it, particularly in terms of what blockchain is going to do, how it's going to redesign things, how it's going to re-engineer things, but I feel, as has been the pattern in this space a little bit, there's a lot of talking and not that much walking. So I would love to hear from all of you, what does impact represent to you guys?
Okay, no pressure in answering that question. I think that's a big one, and I think it's very individual to organizations or individuals, and everyone defines that differently. But for me personally, impact is making a positive change. And that's a super broad definition, but that's how I view it.
So I have a different perspective. I think for me, the crypto anarchist inside of me really enjoys anything that empowers non-traditional communities to be able to find their voice and be authentic, whether it is creating transparency through governments by voting, or whether it's empowering people economically. That's for me is impact. And so I really like to see those type of impacts happening in different types of communities, whether it's Africa or non-traditional communities here within the United States, just having more empowerment through digital technology.
I'm not sure I can add more to that, but I'll try. So actually impact in my world is it's very much addressing all the gaps that we have. We have corruption, and now we can give transparency. That's huge for me. Financial inclusion to people who never had it in the first place. Digital identity for people who never had any possibility of that. So for me, that's huge impact, and it affects individuals, and it affects communities, and it affects societies. And I think that we are here because we know that we have a technology that has the power to make some immediate changes in that way. And I think that that's what this panel is going to discuss, and I can't wait to get there, because impact it's a lot more than what we think, right?
Yeah. For me, I think I really have high hopes for like the decentralized future with blockchain, like the potential to redistribute power and wealth from like the huge tech giants of today to more of the users. And I really hope that us like users will be able to kind of in the future control the systems that today control us in many ways. And I also think it's important that we have diversity and inclusion among the drawing table of these new systems to be able to really shape a future for all of us and build tech that's more human than we've seen in Web 2, I would say.
Okay. I think so everything that I've heard, and of course, something that I feel very strongly about is this broadening of access, is this inviting everybody at that table and discussion, economic access, access to information, to resource, and so on. But again, because we're such a new technology, we have so many barriers to that. And we're still, we're building things in very traditional, economically, well-positioned centers in the States, in Western Europe, in Australia. And how do we, or what are some practical examples from what you have seen or you've worked on that are whether at the beginning of the journey or whether really kind of showing a lot of promise, and how do we boost those things? I had to slip that in there. It's the Boost token. Basically, we minted it together. So, and it focuses on, incentivizing positive action within communities. So, and it's very much what we're after. So I'd love to hear some concrete examples of stuff that you've seen that you're really excited about, again, focused on this, like, who is walking that walk and what are they doing?
Okay, so I think the things that make me the most passionate are anything that's decentralized. And so the second that we start to really like centralize as far as like, getting it, whether it's like, certain educations or whatnot, it becomes really scary to me. But I like decentralized education. So I've seen a couple of different projects where they would just have like lesson plans or just simple lessons plans where a student who maybe is in rural Africa and doesn't get to go to school every single day, they can still have a tracked learning and then show like, okay, well, this is where you were before, and then this is where you're going afterwards. I think that type of thing, it gives access to all different types of people. So the more that we kind of like break the current molds and see like, let's create something totally different rather than reinvest the mold, that to me is something that's really exciting, especially if it can be given towards other communities.
I think add to that, it's there are incredible projects that are making great strides towards impact, but they are doing it against all the challenges that they have confronted, right? And many of them are not making it. And I think this is probably this is the first question I would ask before we actually say, okay, so which projects are actually out there making that impact, right? Because there's a huge number of potential projects that could bring that impact, but they're not making it because they don't have the funds to do it. And that's a problem that I'm actually facing right now. Oops, sorry about that. Well, the problem is the potential is there, the ideas are there, the teams are there, the technology is ready, the features and the proof of concept is already there, and we can't really deploy these projects. And I'm talking about microfinancing farmers in Mexico who are actually looking after the coffee, and they need to have very small amount of money to be able to make that crop. And we're talking about circular economies in very small countries, towns in South America, where they are creating a kind of a circular economy or a local economy, creating a local token and being able to implement it. And we have, like, in order to implement that, it would be only educational assistant, it would only be a very small amount of money that would actually make this go. And it's not happening. And that's probably the one thing I like to talk more about this is why is it not happening? Why is it that we're talking about here, oh, yeah, there's a great potential of projects out there that are doing good. But God, no, they're not, because they don't have the funds to do this.
So I the developer standpoint, from the engineering standpoint, like I would really love if every engineer here had a passion project in an emerging market that they were willing to contribute on GitHub towards, because I feel like a lot of times we kind of gravitate to what we've seen at Denver, what we've seen in NSF and whatnot, but we're really like people who are in, you know, the Congo, and that they have these projects that are growing and they like just need some steam, and it would be nice if people like knew like, hey, I could give my intellect to some of these projects. I mean, we don't have to be just kind of confined into our local economies and our local areas.
I think a big piece of that is visibility as well. We're so used to these traditional models of funding projects closer to us that we understand best. And when I joined UNICEF, was really excited about was this venture fund, which gives $100,000 to early stage startups, which for many people in Silicon Valley or based in New York, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. But to these companies who are based in Bangladesh or India or wherever, $100,000 is a lot of money to get their projects up and started. And so we finally see solutions that are being built by the local communities. And I think that's what we want to see more of. The model of building a solution in New York or Denver or wherever and trying to transplant that into rural Uganda won't work, it will fail. And so we need to empower the local communities to go out and build for their communities and enable them either with the technical skills or with the funding or with mentors or whatever that is, but also bring visibility to that. Both, like, we're all responsible for that, the media is responsible for that, all the dialogues are important.
Yeah, I have high hopes for, I think, like systems outside the systems that can kind of improve lives for people in countries that aren't as free as maybe the Western world. We at Superblocks worked on a kind of a pilot or a small project that we called Marriage Unblocked this summer, where we like launched a platform where same-sex couples could register their vows on Ethereum. It ended up being very piloted due to, of course, GDPR, and the infrastructure of blockchain is still very early on. But it raised a debate around this question, whereas like in 87% of the world's countries today, it's still illegal with same-sex marriage. So I have really high hopes for those kind of solutions on coming with blockchain. I also think like another practical thing is that we, here at ETH Denver have this impact track, and we have this impact panel, which is great. And next year I hope that we will be both men and women in the panel, so that everyone is really like, because this is not just like a women's question or a minority question, this is all our question. And like even like looking at it from like a profit standpoint, I think like bringing in bringing in diversity and equality in your company is gonna make you, at least according to Ernst & Young's, they studied 20,000 companies in 90 different countries, and saw that the companies with diversity at the top were more profitable than the others. So yeah, it's a good start, this impact, and I really hope we can continue on this conversation.
Absolutely, and I think one of the main things that I've kind of gathered from all of your answers is we kind of need more collaboration, don't we? We need that, let's call it collaboration 2.0, where we actually tie in all of these projects and we make sure that we've got education covered, we've got funding, we've got these streams that lead into one another a lot easier than we have had it traditionally, and also that the work that we've been doing in terms of different projects, we kind of need to bring those together. And I think one of the main things that I've been very conscious of with bounties is that looking at how we enable this access to information and resource, and how we make it accessible to anyone in any region, but very much being aware and concerned with the cultural nuances and what the needs are, and how we can solve them is very important. So what do we think then, and also like you said about the panels, and now we have an impact track. Hopefully we're going to have one at every hackathon, and maybe it doesn't just last for 48 hours, but maybe we have an ongoing situation where the conversation continues. We don't just have a panel for half an hour on a side stage and then, you know, we all go home, but we don't really, what are the next steps? So what would be the next steps for you? What would you like to see? What would you essentially want the takeaways to be, and how can we continue the conversation? How can we make sure that this collaboration doesn't just remain, you know, a word in the ether, and we produce something tangible, and we produce something that truly has an impact?
Okay, yes, I feel very passionate about this particular topic here. So at the Blockchain for Humanity, we feel responsible to actually make those connections and make those kind of links between initiatives. We have seen a number of great initiatives that are pretty much working on the same thing with a little bit variation or more or less efforts or more or less resources. And we see that one of the great opportunities is to actually start making those connections, right? That person or that initiative or that group of people who are developing the digital identity can definitely help this other initiative who would want to have that. Or there is an initiative, for example, we have 3 particular initiatives that we work very closely with, and these initiatives became part of our core support because they won an award. So every year we give 2 types of awards to all the projects that are there that are doing some great work on social impact: the Dreamers Award and the Shapers Award. The Dreamers Award are those projects that are really at a very early stage, so we want to push them to that pilot or proof of concept. So that's something that we really take on very seriously to move that forward. The Shapers Award are projects that are a little bit more mature, and they actually serve as models for these dreamers. And they actually are also part of that coaching effect for the Dreamers Award. So we found a little bit of synergies between these projects, and also that all of them have elements that they can actually share with each other. So this was a great opportunity to kind of see the bigger picture and say, okay, so how do we make these links, and how do actually we work together? So we have this sort of project called Crypto Conserje, who is actually educating merchants, vendors, in the border between Venezuela and Colombia, because there's a whole number of refugees going through that border every day. And they're trying to create a microeconomy using cryptocurrencies, but what they're lacking is actually education. So they were on the ground, they created these airdrops, wallets, hard wallets. They distribute them around, and they actually talk to each merchant so that they would understand what they were getting into. I thought that was like, wow, it didn't take much. It was like 4 people really working, on the ground with this, with the people who were getting the airdrops and the merchants, and that was already a huge step forward, which actually then led us to think, okay, what they're doing there is what this Project Circular, who's actually implementing this they call it mutual credit type of system between a community. This is actually what they need. That model of education is what they need, because they don't know how to explain it to people, and they don't know how to actually get the community incentivized to take them on board. So these 2 projects are actually working together and giving each other that sort of support, but also sharing that expertise. So this is an example of where I really would love to go, which is actually collaboration. And like you were saying, it's the funding, it's the education, it's actually the particular pockets of the technology that we're using. So this is, I'm sorry I'm taking so long with this, but this is like the part that I was waiting for to talk about, and this is where I really would like to leave the audience with something to take away. Collaboration and making those dots and connecting those links that we need to really do, because otherwise we're not going to create the impact that we're aiming for.
So I think I'm going to just come from an engineering perspective, and I have asks of all of y'all. And my ask is for you to look at things and say, is there a way that I can decentralize this even further and have a deeper impact towards different communities? Also, allow yourself to be your most authentic self. Look at if there's opportunities for translations. Like I know a lot of times when we're giving these talks or writing docs, it's all in English. And if we could have an opportunity to like translate, so if you know another language, translate it into the language that you do know. Fund a project that is something different than what you are working on would be great. Mentor a person that looks totally different than you. That would be amazing. Fund some of the things that are happening in those communities. Apply towards ETH Cape Town would be fascinating. See if your product actually works within some of these communities that you don't necessarily like interact with. That would be something for me that I would personally like absolutely love, and it's something that y'all can do like immediately as you walk through the door. And then the other aspect of it is like, if you can do absolutely nothing, amplify. If you know that there's a voice that is representing a community that's different from yours, even if it's like in a different language or whatnot, just kind of spread the knowledge out there so that people can find the resources that they are looking for in the communities that they want, and that people who are identifying in that, they can. And like my biggest kudos, I guess, in this whole thing right now, from this whole weekend today, will have to go to Scale, because Scale not only had a Black woman leading, like she had a Black woman at the booth, which is great, but they also had a Black woman giving a technical talk that dealt with live coding, which if you're not an engineer, that's super difficult to understand right now. And if more of our companies had women not only behind the booth, but giving technical talks, I'd give you kudos all day long. Like that to me is something that is super important. If you can have different people from different communities, gaining the exposures, being on the live streams, having the recorded talks, that would be huge. So, I mean, I would gladly give my spot for them. We should also be gladly giving the spots for different people that represent different communities.
Yeah, I would also like to touch upon like collaboration, and I think that's like important also like within our space. There's so many beautiful open source projects, like yeah, making the world a better place to talk like the old web too. But I think we also have some like powerful, I don't know, enemies or whatever you like to call them, but the power holders of the old world are, of course, also looking into blockchain, how they can kind of own that technology. So I think it's really important for that reason also for us as a community to work together. And then if you are running a startup and you're thinking about hiring someone who's different than you, yeah, like think about how to also create a culture where that someone will feel welcome and thrive. Because I think a lot of the time we stop at recruiting, like, great, I recruited someone who's different, but then like also creating a professional and welcoming culture internally is going to be important. And thinking about what biases you have, because a lot of the time we walk around with, even unconsciously, we expect different things from, for example, men and women. So just like looking inside of you and see what you have there, I would like to send to you all.
Remember, it's not just men and women. It's like different races, different extroverts versus introverts. It can be, you know, different social economic statuses or different education statuses. In engineering, it could be self-taught versus like college educated. There's so many different biases that come up about it. And I think, especially in like this community where we're trying to make an ecosystem where all people are welcome, it is really important to sit there and say, like, is this vanilla? Is this meeting vanilla? Is it all the same? If it's all the same, let's sprinkle some sprinkles on this. Like, let's make it a little bit different and decentralize it, and really question if we're coming to the right conclusion out of this meeting, if we're all coming from the same point of thought. Like, that really shouldn't be happening at all. So.
I'll just add to that in saying that over the last little while that we've been chatting, there seems to be three pillars. There's education, there's the funding, and then there's the actual going out and prototyping. And so collaboration obviously underlies all of those. It would actually challenge us to not just talk about it within our community and collaborate within our community, but go outside. And this doesn't apply just to impact, but the blockchain space and early technologies are really bad about talking about what the technology is and what the benefits are. And so we somehow, our team stumbled on Newsweek and said, hey, would you come here and help us shape stories so that more people can understand what the technology is and the impact that they can have? And so more that we can pull in groups from outside into our community and make it more decentralized, I think that that will also help us boost impact for it as well.
Boost, I like that. So again, just to kind of get a conclusion out of this, and then hopefully we'll have some questions from the audience, it's creating the dynamics that enable this. And I think what, again, as you just mentioned it, Christina, we, as an ecosystem, we aren't necessarily the most, accessible ecosystem, and our materials aren't exactly the lightest reads, and the applications or the events are necessarily the most kind of friendly. And I think in terms of education and in terms of translation, it is very, very important to maybe create these frameworks where people can access information in a very, non-jargon laden format. Maybe also create earn as you learn patterns, because not everybody can afford to go on a blockchain developer course. And really thinking about these variations that will enable people to get that control, to really empower them to go, okay, well, so I can earn some cryptocurrency by learning to do this, and then maybe I can set up a project, then maybe I can get some funding from UNICEF Ventures, then maybe I can get some mentorship from people who have been there before me, and really make it to where you don't need to come to Colorado, even though it's amazing, but also very, very high up. And this altitude thing is really messing with me. But that you don't need to turn up to a specific place in order to access this information, right? That you can tap into it from wherever you are. And I think that is the key to it all, is getting that freedom of access where Web 2 kind of failed, well, certainly didn't necessarily do a great job. And we were looking at Chris's slides yesterday in terms of access to 3G and connectivity, and hell, it's happening in the US, let alone, in the broader geographies. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts. We've got maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, so I will actually counter your
Okay.
instruction. So I do know, yay, we got to eat Denver and it's so expensive. But on the flip side of that, for someone who I was not working at the time, I was on maternity leave, so I needed something that was free. And the Ethereum community has a lot of information that's available that's free, and that was one of the things that was made me highlighted it. So I feel like we should be utilizing our assets in a way that benefits other people, but we also need to be cognitive of other people that don't, that could access it if it was in their language. So it would be helpful if the Plaza notes, if we sat there and said, here's a bounty for you to just translate the Plaza note, And I think that it would be very wrong of us to assume that people from other countries don't have the right technical depth and have to be brought up. Sometimes they just need it to be in their language, and they have the technical depth. So I think that we should really just try to sit there and bring people up, but also be bringing up the ones who have to be brought up in it. So I think that we really should be utilizing, amplifying what's our good in a way that should be amplified, but really driving that and thinking it very global across the board, and thinking how can we globalize this a little bit more too. That's the only.
I believe that, language is definitely a problem. I mean, we are at fault of that. I mean, if you go to our website, b4h.world, you would only find it in English at this point, right? And we want to be global, and we have to promote global impact, and we're failing at actually doing it in the multiple language that we need to reach out to. So that's something that we're very conscious about, and we want to make sure that we actually address this. And in conference in general, obviously, if you're in a panel, you're talking in English, and most of the talks are all in English, unless you are very specific in a few countries. But if we actually started implementing these multiple language conferences, whereby you have different streams in different languages, that people could probably be more welcome to actually participate on it, probably that could help a bit. In general, I feel that we always promote the decentralization, inclusiveness, and all this stuff. But I think we're very hypocritical about that in many ways. And, I am... what? You agree, exactly, right? We're inclusive, we love to be everyone. It's open source, you take it, it's yours, it's a gift for you, kind of like, come and join us. And it's like, it doesn't happen like this everywhere. And I don't think that we really walk in the talk when we actually say these things. So
I don't even know why we do it in this because I went to 3 talks already of people that English was a second language, and I just thought well, why aren't they empowered to speak in their first language? Like, why are we not supporting them and able to them to speak in their first language and in English? Because they obviously are speaking both. Like, you can translate your own thing. Why do they not feel empowered to speak their first language? Why is that a thing here? And why do we not make it and say hey, Alexi or whoever, you speak both Czech and English. Why don't you do your presentation in Czech and English so that we're letting both audiences have access to the information? Or saying, can your slides be in Czech or English? Or hey, do you mind if I translate your slides? Like, there are certain things where the assumption is done that it will be in English and it shouldn't be. Sorry.
Kan vi börja med att ta lite på svenska då för alla som...
what was that?
Yeah, just
No, we're going to put a
taking it in
bounty up to get it
Swedish, yeah.
translated. It's okay. It's okay.
No, but when I created this network in Sweden, that was a big thing actually, just to create a group where we could talk about crypto and blockchain in Swedish, because it is very complicated stuff if you're not from a technical background. But then having it in English, that's very true. Like it's these barriers that we don't think about.
So it's the empowering of local communities to actually then create these things. But we definitely, so we're running out of time. We won't have time for questions. Is there one question that somebody, okay, yes.
I would like to know how we open this conversation outside of Western science. Right now, we're a lot of people talking about how do we get
Repeat the question.
So how do we broaden this outside of Western, broaden the conversation outside of Western audiences? How do we achieve this?
So I will just start by repeating something that Nick, the steward of the Impact Track, said that continues to stick with me, which is that talent is universal and opportunity is not. And so the more that we can take steps, even if they're baby steps, to open the dialogue up, I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone on how we can do that on individual local levels. In terms of UNICEF and what we're trying to do in our innovation team, we're actually building a global series of hackathons to go to individual countries, to host hackathons in local languages with youth, to give them a new skill which opens a whole nother marketplace that then they have access to and opportunity to. And we're open to partners for those, so if anyone wants to join that, you can reach out to me on Twitter or dignity.works. We have a form you can fill out. But we have a whole bunch of initiatives, and there's lots of great groups working on initiatives like that. We just have to talk to each other more. So that's my small piece on that.
Yeah, and I think there's almost like there's a bounty in that, like opening up for all the talented people around the world. Because I've been thinking about like tech in general, it's almost like we must have missed like every other Vitalik, every other Steve Jobs, because they didn't get into it for different reasons. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I just submitted a UN talk. I just submitted a talk for the UN specifically on social impact and blockchain. So that will be happening in April, and hopefully we'll get some more heads of state involved in the conversation as well.
Awesome. But yeah, let's continue the conversation throughout the weekend, and we'll hopefully create some sort of maybe write-up after this, so we can have some sort of...
Also, just a side note for me, I will, on my Twitter, I always take a question in any language because I can use Google Translate and it usually gets me to where I need to go. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions or take any questions offline today or later on. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm a very public person. I do not mind at all. Or if there's communities that you feel like I should personally be engaging or could benefit from talking to me, I'm more than happy to do that as well. So. G. Kambwala. If you seriously type Gloria and Kambwala in the internet, It's only
It's
me.
you.
It's the benefit of having like the African last name. It totally works. So if you find Gloria or even Gloria in blockchain, it's still this beautiful face. It will totally work for you. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I see the harbinger of the end of our panel. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, wonderful, wonderful ladies. And let's continue the conversation throughout. Thank you.